Hello. So this video is a performance review of Kari and Stephen Williamson's play Last Night at Black Hollow. This is a murder mystery party rather than a conventional play. So that's a thing that Sock Buskin Theatre Company does several times a year as fundraisers. I've been a part of one. They're a lot of fun to do. They're also very challenging to do. So basically a murder mystery party has typically 3 shortish scripted scenes, and then the majority of it is interaction with the audience, right? So as a character, you talk to the audience members, talk to the guests at this theatrical event. They ask you questions to learn about you as a character, and then at some point someone is murdered. At which point a detective or police officer or whoever it is arrives and basically puts the audience in charge of gathering evidence to find out who the guilty party is. And we do this again through sort of asking questions, through engaging conversation. But then there's also clues around, which tend to be things like newspaper articles, strings of text messages or emails, sometimes handwritten notes, these kinds of things. So the premise of Last Night at Black Hollow was that Lacey Kingsley is hosting her annual Halloween party. Lacey is a publicist who covers sort of a wide range of things, really. From her husband, Brett Kingsley's real estate business and political ambitions, to her best friend Nina Lambert's true crime podcast and aspiring documentaries, to Brooklyn Star's TikTok fame. And along with these people that Lacey directly represents, there's Adam Kingsley, who is Brett Kingsley's associate. There is Mayor Frankenstein. The N stands for Norbert, as he told us when he introduced himself, who's obviously the mayor of the town. And there's Dr. Edgar Graves, who is the town coroner, county coroner, whatever it is. And then we have a party crasher, Professor Eleanor Wilde, who's a professor of occult studies, former client, I guess, of Lacey Kingsley, and as we come to find out, former lover of Brett Kingsley. Over the course of the play, sort of conflicts develop between these different characters. Rumors abound about them, suspicions that Brooklyn Star might have euthanized her grandmother while her grandmother was ill, not just like murdered her for inheritance or something like that, like to prevent suffering, etc., etc. Also, the rumor that Brooklyn Star's grandfather was Ringo Starr, that was proposed by some characters, confirmed by other characters, but been denied by Starr herself. So you get these sort of interesting things. It is one of the cool components of these sorts of things, is while you can make educated guesses about the kinds of things audience members will ask about, you also have to, you have to be prepared to just come up with some stuff. And sometimes that stuff takes on a life of its own. Often because audience members will end up fixating on particular things. So I asked a whole bunch of people about the Ringo Starr thing after Brett Kingsley, played by Jack Donahue, told me that. And let's see, Mayor Stein, played by Luke Streech, he confirmed it for me. He said, yes, that's definitely true. But Brooklyn Star, played by Kylie Ray Schultz, said, no, absolutely not. That's not true. But Adam Carlisle, played by Ryan Gartland, Starr told me that his grandmother was Belinda Carlisle, and he confirmed that. So yeah, I mean, there's all these sort of weird rumors and stuff. But we find out, like, some of the core things that are actually written into the show are things like Brett, as part of his sort of real estate development stuff, plans to tear down Black Hollow Manor. This is opposed by Mayor Stein, who doesn't want that, doesn't believe that this historic site should be torn down just to put up more stores and cheap housing and whatever it is. This is also opposed by Professor Wilde, who asserts that this is a historic site that shouldn't be casually destroyed, and B, believes or professes to believe that there is a curse on Black Hollow Manor, and that anyone who fucks with it will meet a horrible end. We also come to learn that Brett Kingsley and Brooklyn Starr are having an affair, and that Adam Carlisle is in love with, unrequited love with, Lacey Kingsley, played by Kari Williamson. And so we've got these sort of love diamond, right? Sort of a four-sided deal. So we've got all of these conflicts between the characters. And while this is happening, Dr. Edgar Graves, played by Daniel Skiles, is just around being creepy and wise. And he was actually fantastic at that. Andy, my partner, every time Daniel would come over, she just got freaked out by how creepy he was. Because he was, so everybody was dressed as something, right? So this is it's a Halloween party, right? So Lacey was dressed as Cleopatra. Nina Lambert, played by Adiello, was dressed as one of the Pink Ladies from Grease, the movie / musical stage production, various versions of it. Brett Kingsley was dressed as a king. Adam Carlisle dressed as an Egyptian. Professor Eleanor Wilde was sort of not necessarily in a costume. She's sort of in a witchy cloak thing, but as a professor of occult studies who seems just sort of generally kind of like mystical and creepy, that might just be her normal getup for all we know. Mayor Frankenstein was perhaps appropriately enough dressed as Frankenstein's monster. Dr. Graves as the Grim Reaper, and Brooklyn Starr as a black cat. But yeah, so Daniel's makeup was, so he was in a Grim Reaper outfit. He was sort of hunched over, leaned on his side the whole time, hood down, so that really all that was visible of his face was this very sort of pale white face paint, and then just two sort of dark spots where you knew his eyes were, but you couldn't really see them very well. So it was very creepy. Also, Daniel, I don't know if Daniel just knew this information or if he just made this up and made it up in a way that sounded very convincing. But after the murder, Brett dies, by the way, I did ask him if he thought it was murder, if he thought that Brett was poisoned. And basically he was like, some sort of toxin. Whether that is poison or whether that is venom or something like this, I couldn't say without an autopsy. And he mentioned a black widow bite as a possibility. And I asked, what about a brown recluse? Might that be the culprit? And he was like, no. The presentation of symptoms is totally different. Here is what happens with a brown recluse bite. Here's what happens with a black widow bite. Here's what happens physically within the body. Here's how they show up differently. And yeah, knowing Daniel and the sort of random, possibly useful, possibly just concerning information in his head, that could very well be true. I have no idea. But if it's not true and he just made it up to sort of bluff me, to make it sound like Dr. Graves knew what he was talking about, he did an amazing job, because as a person who does not actually know, I thought it was very convincing. But that's part of the thing, right? That's part of the thing with this type of performance, where most of it is interactions with the audience, is you have to remain in character, which they did really, really well, with a couple of instances, a couple of exceptions where Luke just sort of talked to me because we know each other from other shows, and we've performed together and things like this. So there was a couple of moments where he was just like, I'm going to step out of character and make this comment to you about something going on in the world. Like, one of them was, for instance, the irony of doing a show about a guy who wants to tear down a manor being murdered at basically the same time that the East Wing of the White House was being demolished by the Trump administration. And yeah, that's true. That's 100% an ironic universe coincidence. But for the most part, they stayed in character really, really well. And one of the things that means is sort of developing your character's ethos, figuring out what your character is all about, and bringing that energy, bringing that focus, bringing those ideas to every answer that you give, even when that question might be unexpected. And I always say this, I'm a terrible audience member for these types of things. Anywhere where I have to interact with the actors to try and gather information about who the murderer is or anything like that, I am terrible at it. I am the person you do not want in the audience. Because one of the things that they do for these murder mystery parties is they actually print up little cards for between each of the each of the three main pieces of action, right? So you've got the introductory scene, which sets the stage and introduces the characters. Then we mingle with them, and there's particular questions that we as audience members are encouraged to ask to get more information about them. Then you have the middle portion, which is, oh no, a murder has happened. Oh, a detective or police officer or whoever it is here. Now you will all investigate. Audience members, you will investigate. Right, so that's the second portion. Then we have sets of questions we're supposed to ask in order to gather information to figure out who done it. Right? I tend to ignore those questions, and I ask stuff that, while a real person might be able to answer them, are sort of intended to be challenging for actors. So I try and think about things that it's unlikely they've developed in terms of their characters, and I tend to go for those things. So I'm terrible at this. But the majority of people, I would say, based on my experience, do ask the questions based on the cards or similar types of questions. And so characters do develop these quirks. They develop these sort of central concerns or ethos elements. So Mayor Stein, for instance, was very concerned about ethics, right? He's a very anti-corruption guy. Brett Kingsley, very much sort of a womanizer, very much sort of self-centered and sort of believes that he's the best at stuff. Professor Wilde, very much is a sort of strange blend of occult and professor, which of course is the two things that she is. But this sort of sense of like, let me tell you this spooky tale, and we'll We'll learn why you shouldn't demolish local landmarks. Ooh, this kind of thing, right? So all of the actors develop the personalities of their characters, and it's really, really fun to be a part of, either as an audience member, which I was for this one, or as a performer, which I've done before and quite likely will do again. Yeah. So, I think it's a really, really fun thing. And I love Halloween. And so last night at Black Hollow was tremendous fun for me for that reason, along with just the excellence of the performances.